5, 4. Hey folks, Alan Saunders with Stephen Patrick. Again, we're going to do this quarantine video chat, talking some sports. We're going to talk some wrestling today. Actually, lots of Pitt wrestling news today, and there's been some pretty steady trickle, actually, of things to talk about since the end of the premature end of the 2019-20 wrestling season. I guess first, big stuff today happening with Pitt adding a volunteer assistant and another wrestler in their RTC. What do you make of the big news today, Steve?
Yeah, so three big things happened with the RTC today. Number one, Pitt graduating senior Demetrius Thomas is re-signing to stay with the program, the RTC. Nikko Lucas, the resident athlete from last year, is re-signing as well to stay on. And the big addition came with Luke Blocher, the graduating senior from Ohio State, an All-American and local kid, signing on as a volunteer assistant with the Pitt program as well as a resident athlete with the RTC.
So when it comes to the RTC resident athletes, I mean, they're training for their personal careers. How does that impact the Pitt program, though?
So it impacts the Pitt program during the summer and the off season when a lot of the college athletes are training for freestyle, specifically either U23s or for the senior level or junior level events. When they're practicing freestyle in the room, they're training with the RTC guys. And even though it's freestyle and it's not folk style, which is the college style of wrestling, there's a lot of carryover. In addition to that, the guys are around the program all the time. So they're working with the college athletes, their work ethic, their habits, their training habits, they're all rubbing off on the younger guys. And in terms of, the quality of wrestler at the RTC, you're not getting marginal starters in D1 or guys that never placed. It's only the cream of the crop that continues their career after college to train for the Olympics. So you're getting multiple-time All-Americans and national champs, and obviously the college kids can learn a lot from them.
Obviously, Pitt wrestling fans are pretty familiar with Demetrius Thomas and what he brings to the table. Great leadership, great kid, really. In addition to a really good wrestler. But maybe if they're not as familiar with Luke Blocher, what's he all about? And obviously, how did his career go there at Ohio State?
Yeah, so Luke's from Latrobe. I think he was a 3-time Whitfield champion, 2-time Super 32 champion, 3-time Pennsylvania state champ. He was one of the best recruits by far in the country coming out of his graduating class. So he goes to Ohio State, has a good year his freshman year, doesn't quite place at nationals, but then his sophomore and junior year, he got 4th at the NCAA tournament. He was a 3-time Big Ten finalist, including this past year he won the Big Tens by defeating Nick Lee of Penn State, number 1 versus number 2 kid in the country clash there. And the victory is good enough to get him the 1 seed at NCAAs, but unfortunately, like you mentioned earlier, they're not going to happen.
So, yeah, I mean, when we talked to Demetrius Thomas after winning the ACC title, he was talking about nationals, and he was talking about Olympic trials. With the Olympics being pushed back a year, what does that do for these guys as far as their time frame for that kind of thing, and how does that affect that process?
Well, one of the immediate effects is all 10 of the NCAA champions from this year, or would-be NCAA champions, were automatic qualifiers for the Olympic trials. So now that the NCAAs didn't happen, there's 10 spots that are left unfilled. So I'm not sure how they're going to fill those spots, whether they do a qualifying tournament next year before the trials or what. But that was how Meach planned on qualifying, was hopefully winning NCAAs. So in order for him to make the trials now, he's going to have to go through some other avenue. But in terms of the training, the Olympic trials were scheduled to be 2 weeks after NCAAs this year. So all the college guys that wanted to compete in them are going to have to switch gears really quickly from folk style to freestyle. And not only that, but recover after the grueling NCAA tournament, keep their weight down. And so it's almost a blessing in disguise. And now they have a whole year to refocus and get their training cycle in order.
Now, there are some guys that take what's called an Olympic year red shirt, where they'll not wrestle for an entire year. I don't Pitt didn't have any of those, but I mean, so some of those guys that weren't wrestling in NCAAs this year are now gonna be between now and the Olympic trials.
Right.
So like, it's gonna
Right.
be this super class of wrestlers coming out of NCAAs where you'll have all of the seniors from this year, everyone that took an Olympic red shirt, and all the seniors from next year, all in this big pile heading into Olympic trials.
Yeah, one guy in particular is Yanni Diakomihalis, the two-time NCAA champ from Cornell. He's probably the odds-on favorite to be our Olympic rep at 65 kilos next year. And he took his Olympic red shirt this year, in preparation for the trials. And now, what's he going to do? He can't take another one next year. So he's going to train folk style all year for the college season and then have to switch gears to freestyle again. So it's really interesting.
That's a pretty uniquely American issue. So do you think that could be a hindrance at the Olympic level for the Americans?
No, because most of our Olympic guys are already out of college, so they're focusing on freestyle 100% of the time. And the ones that are in college that have a chance, namely Yanni and Spencer Lee from Iowa, they're good enough, and B, they're training freestyle so much of the time anyway that it's not going to really matter.
You talked a little bit about Nikko Lucas, a local guy from Franklin Regional, wrestled at Penn State, now in the second year at the RTC. What's he wrestling for at this point?
So Nikko made the U.S. national team this past year in 2019, which meant he placed top 3 at the World Team Trials. And unfortunately, he tore his ACL after that. So he wasn't able to keep competing. And I'm not sure if he got surgery or not. I think he just rehabbed it. And then a couple of weeks ago, it re-tore. So he's going to be sidelined for a while. But once he recovers from that, I'm assuming it's his goal to make a world team. So he's been competing at either 57 or 61 kilograms, which is about 125 or 134 pounds.
So that's sort of the RTC end of things. We'll talk about the Pitt team a little bit. Obviously, very disappointing way for the season to end. The guys were planning on, what was supposed to be a historic experience there. They're going to have the NCAA Championships on the turf at US Bank Stadium, where the Vikings play, 40,000 people in the stands, to just over. I imagine that's going to be tough for those guys to deal with, and for a couple of them, Demetrius Thomas, Taylor Romani, that's it for their Pitt career and college career. Just maybe talk a little bit about the way the end of the season has gone for these guys and kind of how they're dealing with it.
Yeah, it's really tough. You were down there in the tunnel with me after ACCs, and all the Pitt qualifiers were so excited for nationals, especially, wrestling in front of 40,000 fans. Pitt had a really good showing at the ACC, so they had a lot of momentum going into the tournament. I know Jake Wenzel was very excited after beating 2 of the top guys in the country in his bracket, and he's never wrestled at NCAAs before. And then you have guys like Mickey, who next year he's going to be a redshirt junior, and he's only wrestled at NCAAs one time because he redshirted, he was ineligible, then he was a freshman, and then this year, his sophomore year. So next year he'll be his 5th year in college wrestling, and he only has one NCAA tournament under his belt. And then Meach too, because he wrestled NAIA for the first 2 years, and then came to Pitt. Had a good year last year, went to NCAAs, didn't do as well as he wanted to, and then doesn't get to compete as a senior. So that's really tough.
And it's we've been talking about it at Pittsburgh Sports now for a couple of days now about the process they went through with the spring sports. It was a consideration to maybe get these guys some eligibility back. It's a very, very difficult process when you start to work through it, though. Even with what we're talking about with baseball, where those guys didn't get hardly any of their season, it's going to be very, very complicated. Going to be a lot of hurt feelings. Not exactly a smooth process. I imagine with wrestling, where all but a handful of guys were done in every weight class anyway, you have to really be very difficult to work it out.
Well, it was going to be almost impossible.
Yeah,
with the scholarship situation, and having incoming freshmen who were going to start and people coming off redshirt who were planning on starting next year. If you gave the seniors an extra year, it would have messed up a lot of things. But
Excuse me.
There is some discussion. I don't know how much, stock to put into it, but a lot of the NCAA coaches want to have this year's NCAA tournament and maybe a modified version next year. There are a couple big midseason tournaments in December at the Southern Scuffle or the Midlands. Maybe just taking one of those tournaments and take these brackets and wrestle the tournament. If the seniors are still around, they can still make weight, then they can come back. That would be really cool if they can do that.
Yeah, what's the there's a couple early ones too, even like Cliff Keen or something like that, where they could do it too.
Yeah.
So I mean, turning the page for Pitt from 20 to 21. Losing a couple important guys, but they've been recruiting, got a couple of big pieces in. Where are the big, obviously heavyweight's a big question mark still. Where are the big changes you see coming to the Pitt team in the next year?
So the big changes are with the three graduating seniors, obviously. Taylor Mamrani leaves a pretty big hole at 157. I'm not really sure how Pitt's going to fill it. If it's with someone on their active roster, maybe there's an off chance Jake Wenzel can cut down to 157. He did wrestle there as a freshman, although I do think that's not really an option at this point. So that's a pretty big hole. Maybe looking at a transfer, I'm not sure. Kellen leaves the hole at 197, but Pitt will have Austin Cooley coming off redshirt next year. He was a good prep wrestler in high school. He was a national prep champion. So he didn't wrestle much this past year. He had a knee injury, but he should be able to fill that slot adequately. And then, Meach obviously leaves a huge hole at heavyweight. Colby Whitehill, a graduating senior from Brookville High School, I think he's ranked about 8th in the country. He's coming in as a recruit. I would expect him to redshirt this year. Have Cole Rickert, he'll be a senior next year, have him wrestle for a year heavyweight, then have Whitehill step in after that.
What's the rest of the recruiting class look like? Where's the most talented guys coming in?
The two best guys are Whitehill at heavyweight and a kid named Mick Burnett. He's from Elyria High School in Ohio. He wrestled 138 this year, although I believe the Ohio State tournament was canceled because of the coronavirus. So he was an Ohio State champ as a junior, so he didn't get a chance to defend his title. But he's ranked 6th or 7th in the country. So he looks like to be a 141 or a 149 pounder in college. So him and Whitehill are the two best guys. And they also have a couple other kids from Pennsylvania. Antonio Petroselli, he wrestled 138 and 145 this year. Stephen Schott from Nazareth, he was a 220 pounder. And Lucas Montgomery from Bethel Park, he was a state finalist this year at 195.
Was actually, talking about some local kids there, and I was talking with a friend, was a high school wrestling coach, and he said, it was pretty crazy talking about Pletcher coming back to Pitt, and he wrestled against Mickey Philippi when they were in high school, and a couple of the top ranked kids in the whole country, right? In Westmoreland County, and then you look at guys like Nikko Lucas or Spencer Lee. What's the state of wrestling in this area? Is it still where it was? I mean, and obviously we didn't have a full, you can't compare it to other states, not already finished or whatever, but where's the prep wrestling in this area right now?
It's just as good as it's ever been. I don't know. I can't remember the exact numbers off the top of my head, but over the last 6 or 7 years, the Whippeal has absolutely dominated the Pennsylvania State tournament. And some years having 7 or 8 champs, and there's only 14 weight classes. So when half the champs are coming from 1 out of 11 districts, that's pretty impressive. Maybe there's 12 districts, I'm not sure. But some of the very best kids in the high school are coming out of the Whippeal this year. Sam Hilligas from North Hills, Alejandro Herrera Rondon from Seneca Valley, Luke Stout from Mount Lebanon. Unfortunately, none of them are going to Pitt, but the Whippeal's still producing some of the nation's best high school wrestlers.
Well, I mean, sort of cycling all the way back to the beginning, one of the things we talked about as the head coach was they needed that RTC to really be competitive when it came to getting and keeping the best wrestlers. They're getting a venue, which they've needed for several years. Do you see Pitt is in a good position here to get a larger percentage of those quality WPIAL wrestlers going forward?
Yeah, I do. Getting, Nikko's from Franklin Regional, Luke Blocher's from Latrobe. They go to Penn State and Ohio State for their college careers, but at least now they're coming back to Pitt. What Pitt needs to do differently going forward is not letting them leave in the first place. And having some of the best WPIAL wrestlers from the last decade, like those two, being in the room, combined with the new facilities and the good coaching staff and everything like that, hopefully you would think will help the local talent, be persuaded to stay around. But the only thing that's really going to change that is success at the NCAA tournament. Yeah, not counting this year because there was no tournament, but Pitt hasn't had an All-American in 5 seasons now. That's completely unacceptable. Programs like Virginia Tech have them every year. NC State has them every year. They could have very easily had 2 or 3, 2 finalists this year. And Pitt's right there. They're 5-5 or 6-4 with them in the dual matches, but they're not having the same success at the NCAA tournament. And until that changes, the very high-end talent's not going to come to Pitt.
Well, I think that's pretty much covered all the bases there. What else? Anything else we need to talk about? Pitt wrestling or local wrestling or anything like that? WrestleMania?
No, I could talk for a couple hours there, Alan. I do think Pitt's on the rise. I think they would have had a top 20, maybe top 15 year at NCAAs this year, which would have been,
with 7 guys.
17,
you almost have to be in the top 20.
Yeah, the last 3 years they finished 32nd, 34th, and 33rd or something like that. I think they probably would have been like 16th or 17th this year, which would have been a really nice thing to show progress to future recruits. But again, it didn't happen. So I think Pitt's showing at the ACC tournament with 3 champs and Taylor in the finals and being just a point or 2 away from beating NC State is proof of, where the program is heading.
Point or 2 in a call, maybe.
Yeah, that's been well documented.
Well, how are you dealing without wrestling? I know you're really disappointed not getting to go to Minnesota. What's your life like right now? I know you are essential at work, right? So you're still going full bore here.
I'm essential. Yeah, I'm a physical therapist, so I'm still out there seeing patients. Luckily, there aren't too many cases in Washington and Greene County where I work, so I've been protected so far. But yeah, no wrestling. It's been really tough. ESPNU was rerunning some old NCAA tournaments last weekend, and I got caught up watching those, so that was nice. But yeah, looking forward to when the competition resumes.
Well, sounds good. Thanks for taking some time, and maybe we'll do this again when we get some more news in. And yeah, it's been fun. Hopefully, we'll keep the sports the sports appetite going for people while they're stuck at home.
Yeah, I'll have an article about the Pitt's incoming recruiting class coming out pretty soon.
Sounds good. Look for it at Pittsburgh Sports. Now, give Steve a follow on Twitter at Steve Patrick PT. Did I get that right?
Yep.
And yeah, that was fun. We'll do it again. Thanks, man.
Right,
good to see you. Hope you're doing well.